All right, it's time to put this engine in this engine bay. So I got the car on jack stands right now, high enough to be able to get the engine hoist underneath it. I have a jack on the trans where it's elevated up, and when I put the engine in there, I'm going to hopefully line up the torque converter bolts onto the flywheel of the engine. Also make sure that you don't, this engine had a dowel stuck in it, so to get that dowel out, you should not have dowels in your trans, but there should be two. You want to have two dowels. Make sure there's dowels on both sides of your engine. Before I put the engine in, I'm going to put this exhaust flange gasket on the H-pipe. I also have new trans bolts. This engine was missing several trans bolts, so this is I got 8 of these. They're M10 by 1.5 by 65 millimeters. Okay, so I got it lined up. You know, just slowly lower it down. Make sure the wiring harness and everything is out of the way while you're lowering it. So it looks like everything's lined up. There's about an inch gap there. I don't think it's sitting on the dowels yet. I think I need to rotate the engine to try and line up the torque converter bolts. Okay, so looking underneath there, I can see that it's actually hitting where the motor mount goes in. So I'm going to raise the engine up and see if I can get it back in there. Okay, so now the engine slid back. It's really close to the trans. There's only like maybe a ½ inch gap. I'm going to go underneath there, see if I can't get some bolts started and suck them together. Underneath the car now, you can see that the trans and the engine are like right up against each other, so everything looks like it lined up. And you can see even the torque converter nut has gone through the flex plate. So now I'll just start bolting trans in. Okay, I got 3 bolts started on the bottom, so it really sucked the trans up into the engine. So now I'm going to see if I can lay it all the way down. You want to make sure you don't squish anything between the trans and the engine, like a wiring harness or anything like that. And there it is. Now it's down in. It can be a little tricky to get it down into the groove where the motor mounts go, but it's in. Now we can disconnect the hoist. Back underneath the car, I'm going to put the rest of the bolts in for the trans. There's 3 on this side, 2 on this side. Now from the top, I'll put the top 2 trans bolts in. And now underneath the car, we can bolt the exhaust up. Make sure your gasket is in there. Okay, with the exhaust bolted up, we can move on to bolting the torque converter to the flex plate. Now that the torque converter is bolted to the flex plate, I had to hold the crankshaft. Now we can put our little access plate on. Now we can snake our starter up in there. Now make sure the wires are routed correctly and you can connect your wires to the starter. Now we can do the motor mounts. Now we can put this bar in. Okay, that's a good stopping point there. Got you know, the engine's in there. Almost everything's buttoned up underneath. It's bolted to the trans. The exhaust is hooked up. The only things that we need to do on the bottom still are the hydraulic pump and the AC compressor. But other than that, we'll be moving up to the top and getting the intake manifold on this thing.